Hi, y'all.
Hello.
How you doing, Steve?
Yeah, not too bad.
Thanks again for doing all the hard work on getting that doc ready for sharing.
It was just kind of trying to capture everything that people were saying in the last call, so it wasn't too much hard work.
I still appreciate it. Still appreciate it. Get that doc open is what I'm doing now. I noticed you did make a few comments recently, or maybe close some stuff recently. Is that what I
Yeah,
saw?
I accepted some of the suggestions that were in there just so that it was as clean as possible, ready for the call.
Appreciated. Uh, yes.
I think they were your edits.
Nice. Thank you for that. I try, despite having admin rights, I try and follow the same process, unless it's a typo. In a typo, I sort of then I'll use my admin abilities. Otherwise, I uh, try to do suggestions. What's up, Colin?
Yo,
Yo. Oh, give it a couple minutes. I know there's definitely a few people more that I expect to see here. So rather than do a rehashing, we can just wait a couple minutes. I got down to one GitHub notification this weekend. It was a glorious day.
I don't know if I'll ever see that happen. I'm jealous.
To be fair, every once in a while I hit like clear done or whatever, and it does slightly more than I need to, and then I spend like an hour trying to figure out which ones I had meant to keep open to review, and then I just say, it'll come back around if it's important. Unintentional amnesty on my inbox. Thanks, GitHub UX.
Hey everybody, good morning.
Good
Or
morning,
good
good
evening.
morning. Or evening, yeah, exactly. Don't you take away the end of my working day here, Corbin.
I know, I'm sorry.
It's
Just getting
fajita time
started.
after this meeting.
Just getting started for the day, sadly.
We will give it just one more minute, and then we'll kick off. Don't want to train people to come late to meetings either by being too patient. While we're waiting for people to come in, the first document that we're going to be talking on is this one here, which is the one that Steve was so kind to start kicking off the text on, and is about the assessment audience and outcomes. So, cool. I see everyone joining. That's awesome. All right, let's go. Let's get kicked off. So I said this at the beginning of the last deep dive call. We have some new faces, so I'll just reiterate. I and myself and Colin, who's here, are both co-leads of the working group. We are able to help initiatives by unblocking things, by finding the right connections, by leading things. We tend to be quite lead-y in the regular calls that are twice a month. In these calls, we are here just as participants, and it is our call to figure out how we go. There's no requirements or no agenda and no things, but we might help try and make sure that we stay within, like, identify what the goals are of the group and be able to track those. That might be one of the things that you see me doing. And to that end, the last time that we were here together was a couple weeks ago. There's a video of that call, if you weren't able to be on it, where we were talking about the potential format of the assessment tool. And what we had identified was that the format had some specifics that people were were sharing their experiences with and feeling tension of what made sense or didn't in their context. And what we realized was that it was hard to make decisions or debate those things because we didn't have a shared foundation of what we were trying to achieve. We sort of assumed we did because everyone was really excited about the concept of an assessment framework and a addendum to the maturity model. But like many things, when our the verbal words don't always translate to a shared understanding as much as they might seem that way. So we took a step back and we created this assessment audience and outcomes document to try and make sure that any other time that we're having conversations about the implementation of the assessment, we can make sure that it's always tracing back to what is the thing that we're actually trying to achieve. So I think what our hope was by scheduling this call was to get alignment and confirmation on this document as much as we could, and then figure out how that unblocks us for the next step of detailed thinking towards the assessment. So this is a great time, if that does not jive with anyone else's understanding of what we're trying to achieve today, to give a shout. So is there anything else somebody was hoping to achieve today or thought we might be working towards today that are surprised by my summary? Okay, either spot on or very scary, one or the other. So I'm hoping that I'm spot on, and I will just leave it there then. That's my summary. So who wants to kick us off around the audience and outcomes doc?
I can say a quick thing about it if it helps to just grease the wheels. So hopefully the document captured generally what we were all talking about last time when we were talking about those goals and outcomes. Obviously, because there's like lots of different viewpoints, like I don't know if I managed to capture it in a way that reflects what everyone understood about the call, but loads of folks have kind of gone in and contributed tweaks to make it a lot better since I drafted it. So I think the key thing is we've got a list of people that we think are the audience for this assessment. And there's three groups now. There's kind of the platform engineering creators, so engineers, product managers, architects. There's the people paying for it, the sponsors. So this is like directors, VPs, head of platform engineering, team managers. And then there are kind of other stakeholders, so like the end users of the platform, DevX folks, DevOps folks, SREs. So that's like, these are the people that are likely to come across it. And hopefully, if there are people who maybe don't use that particular role name, they kind of associate with one of those, hopefully. And then in terms of the outcomes, the quote that I stuck in there was from the maturity model, which is like, we want people to find where they are in this maturity model and then find out what they can do to improve. I think that's like the summary of the two goals. So the idea is just to help people orient themselves and work out they might be really strong in a bunch of areas and they might be weak in a particular area. And I think what Colbin was showing us last time, like with this scoring, it's going to be like possible to identify where your weakest area is. And then we just need to tell them, like, what do they do now? Abby.
Thank you. Yes, that all makes sense to me. I have two questions that have arisen. So I'll go with one and we'll see where that goes, and then I can always come back with the other. So the first was that you mentioned one of the goals is to help them to figure out where you are, figure out then what you can do to improve. And I think one of the areas that I'm particularly passionate about personally is making sure that improvement is tied into what you need to do to improve, like what improvement you need, not just what you could do, right? So we can always write cleaner code, we can always refactor better, we can always do things in a different way, but whether or not that's the like value that you can be providing or the right level of investment for what you're doing. I think if I remember correctly, I read it last night, but I remember correctly, we do have language around that. And so I just want to see if other people feel like that's a fair like caveat, I guess, to the always improving. Like there's a world where someone says where they are at, and I could imagine a world where it's like, actually, you are like almost over investing in an area, like not telling you to stop doing it, but just saying like you are overly above where you need to be given the expectations of your team, your organization, your users, etc. Is that what people would expect as well? Yeah, go for it, Steve.
Yeah, so the bullet point we got in here for this is that the general bullet is we want to guide people away from maximalism. So we don't want them to just like try and hit right. We want to be on the like 5 out of 5 on everything. Because that's where you end up like spending money where you don't need it or looking to do things you don't need to do. And we've kind of that's really the idea. That's what we're trying to do, is like make it so that we're not I don't know if anyone's ever been assessed for like CMMI, but the goal of CMMI is always like dial it up to 10 on everything, right? More documentation, more checks, more balances, more gateways. We don't want to turn it into an exercise like that. We want it to be, there's some sentences people added as well, where they were talking about like supporting business goals with it. I think that was quite key for me. It's like,
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective, like it captures everything pretty well, because my framing for this kind of like types of initiatives is it's a journey, right? Like, and so like you're really trying to help people sort of on their journey, right? So like for me, like I got to chat with Abby a little bit yesterday about just this process of bringing this document to the community and like all the things, right? And it's like I've never done that before, right? So she's kind of my Sherpa. She's like guiding me on the journey and like helping me kind of navigate my way. And I kind of think about this tool the same way. Like it's people just don't know what they don't know, right? So they're like, hey, this is what we're doing. Like, are we on the right track? Should we be doing something different? And it sort of depends on how they consume this tool as well. Like some people, it's just going to be like a self-assessment. They'll be able to find it out there. They'll be able to like look at it and kind of think about or reason about like what are they working on, where are they at, kind of self-assess, right? And I think people can do that now with the maturity model, right? And then there's other scenarios where maybe somebody's helping them with that, right? And in that way, can help them like kind of understand like, hey, you don't really need to worry about that thing, or maybe these are some suggestions, right? Or areas where you could like kind of start working on or start thinking about, right, as you plan. And a lot of it, I really think about that sort of that product mindset. Like like when you have that product mindset, you're always thinking about, it could be features and capabilities, but it also could be like, what else do we need to be doing? Like where are the friction points, getting feedback from the end users, right? There's a bunch of stuff that kind of happens that naturally kind of shapes the evolution of the product, as it grows.
Antoine, hi.
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, it's not just about guiding them, but also warning them. I mean, each steps you're going to have a recommendation, so some guides, some articles to read, but also maybe a maturity warning. Be careful, don't maybe not don't do this, but be aware of such limitation, what's about to come, things you need to be aware. So I think the warning and the danger part of the guide should be included in the risk assessment.
I think that's super interesting. So it could also be, as you invest in this, here's like indicators you're investing in getting the outcomes you're looking, like you're moving in the right direction versus just investing and not getting what you want. So there's warnings of like platform as a product gone wrong, right? So you should be investing in treating your platform like a product. But if you start to see that like one person is making, decisions based solely on their own personal opinions, like, yes, you might have a product manager, but that's not platform as a product. So there might be things like that as well. So that's a really interesting perspective. And yeah, if you see this, you've gone too far.
Question one: when did you talk to your user? It was 3 months ago. Warning: it's a bit long ago.
Definitely. Okay. Any other opinions, experiences, hopes, whatever around that sort of guidance side of things, or the the support there, or feeling that anything we're talking about here could be better documented into here, so that when we refer back to it, it will be even clearer and more obvious to newcomers and ourselves over the next couple of months.
Quick question, or when we look at the audience, and not to touch on the touchy subject, but a lot of times somebody kind of gets put into a role to be like an internal consultant to help figure out what this journey needs to look like. And so do we really having a consulting mindset should be okay? Right, there's going to be some internal sales that's going to have to happen to, you gather information, get buy-in, set up a report, do whatever, and this will likely be an artifact from that planning process or leveraged in that planning process too. But do we need to include that, like if we're acknowledging that somebody in a consulting role may use this, does that need to be somewhere in an audience or something like that, or maybe it's called out somewhere? Wasn't sure, especially when we start getting into like questions on the language, like the use of the term risk or any other things there. I think it's a very real reality that I don't want to necessarily skirt by.
I mean, for my view, like the target audience that we're talking about is really the consumer. And so when I think about like the consultant, I think about somebody who's helping the customer or the organization kind of like do the assessment, or like maybe do work around like the improvements or whatever, right? Like they're definitely going to be a stakeholder for sure. I'm just thinking about it more from like a consumption perspective versus like more of an execution like way, because we didn't really talk about how people would consume it here, right? So we didn't talk about like how somebody might do a self-assessment or, in that way, or somebody might like work with, a vendor or somebody else in the community to help them like guide their journey. Like, so I don't know if we want to cover that sort of area, or if we want to move them in as like a stakeholder. I added like the third section last night around other stakeholders, because from my experience, the platform engineering team is usually like loosely coupled with developer experience and other teams that are kind of helping deliver the platform, right? It's not always just one team that's like very cohesive. It sometimes can be 2 or 3 teams that all are coming together under this sort of umbrella.
Do we would it be useful, or just maybe too much to have a section that's more direct on like how to use or like ways to use this or something?
And whether or not we can do that before having it. So that was actually the second topic. This is I'm very interested in going deeper on this, because that was the second topic I was curious about, which is that idea of if you create something for everyone, you create something for no one. And I'm a little bit concerned that we have these 3 audiences, which I think are all really valid audiences. I don't want to remove them as like associated with platform engineering and associated with maturity assessment and all that. But what I'm a little bit concerned at is we don't elevate any of them as our core target audience, even though verbally through this conversation, I heard Corbin, for example, advocate that this is mostly targeted at, like, I think I heard you say, Corbin, the platform engineers, the first set of people, the people building the platform, the engineers, the managers, and the product managers and the architects there. And so, yeah, so that was my other question, was like, how do we take these 3 really different sets of people and actually service them all through this one through this one piece of work? Or do we need to acknowledge where we aren't going to be supporting? And that is, I think, independent of, I do believe that the consulting concept should be included in this. Whether or not I think that should be the primary target, we can have that discussion, but I do think they need to be in the documents. I think you're very on point, Colin, that is a core kind of characteristic of this kind of work. So to not have it in there would leave people wondering where it fits. And so we can tackle that.
Yeah, I'm almost as you're saying that too, in my head, I'm thinking like the audience that's here is it's almost like the audience of the maturity model anyway, that we're kind of reinforcing. And I wonder, and I'm thinking back to the spreadsheet and like to the tool and just kind of visualizing where I could almost see having, I'm not trying to create more work, I'm just vocalizing because maybe it sparks something somebody else is thinking about, but the platform engineering audience versus the sponsors audience versus even the other stakeholders, they're going to perceive the information that comes from the assessment in different ways. It's going to be different sections or different questions are going to be meaningful to them in different ways. And so I could see having, you know, what does this mean to me as a, sponsor? What does this mean to me as the platform engineer? And being able to provide some specific guidance based on that particular audience. And it doesn't necessarily change the format, but like I want to point out to an internal stakeholder or to a sponsor probably that not investing in a customer service process to create communication between the platform team and the consumers of the platform could be not wanting to invest in that could be a downfall, could be a pitfall. And to the platform team, it could be articulating that you need to communicate with your end customer and have a product mindset. So there's kind of two different perceptions of that. So just thinking out loud there.
I suppose going along with the different perceptions, I think those different stakeholders would also use the outcomes differently. So as an engineer, I think I would use it as not necessarily ammunition, but as backup to help me promote certain initiatives. And it's helpful to have a framework like that to use as a basis for any recommendations. And I imagine then that perhaps a sponsor would perhaps use it in a different way. So I mean, for me, I quite like the way that it's presented and the way that I kind of provide a summary for, okay, well, this is where we are and this is where I think we need to be. And this is the roadmap that I think we need to follow to get to, going back to what Abby was saying, what looks right for my organization.
So does it make sense to just highlight the platform engineering team as the primary audience? Because that's kind of, I think what I'm hearing is like, there are potentially other teams like involved and they may find value and it may be useful. Like I added that section because like I've been practicing this a little bit, right? For the last couple months. And in those examples, like I've had people from these other teams. That's why I put them as like stakeholders. But there'd be like one person representing like the end user community, or there'd be one person representing the DevX side of things or whatever, right? So while they're there in the room and participating, or like there was this, I guess probably the most like best example of this was, there's a question that I have that kind of focuses around this notion around platform utility. Like it's like, hey, do developers like get value from the platform like on a daily basis? Like, do they go there every day when they get up in the morning, or do they just go there, once a month or whatever, right? And the platform engineering team was like, no, I don't think so, right? But the end user in the room was actually like, yeah, like actually I do get like daily utility from the platform, and like kind of, it was like I don't want to say eye-opening, but it was like they were like, oh, okay, like I guess like we do have users who are getting daily utility, right? And we wouldn't have got that point of view if that person hadn't been in the room on that particular aspect of it. So I think it can be useful, but I think pertinent to the discussion was, are we trying to serve that community? Are we trying to like focus on outcomes specific to end user, or outcomes specific to developer experience or whatever? Not necessarily, right? So I think it is useful to maybe call out platform engineering as like the primary target, and then, you know, the other groups as maybe like, you know, potential participants.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it could be even, we could caveat it to like, even for an organization that doesn't have a formalized platform team, or in some organizations, we have multiple teams that are competing to be the platform team in a way, but being able to say something like you're like the platform lead or platform champion or something like that too is, you know, could be a fair way to designate it for somebody that hasn't already formalized and said, we have a platform team. This is the thing. Let's evaluate our maturity. There's a lot of works that are trying to start somewhere that might cover. Sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Oh, no, that's cool. I think what's really interesting about that concept of people having very different ideas of the value of the platform, and maybe the platform team not understanding how people are using it. I feel that one of the exercises we should recommend around this is getting a group of people across these audiences together in a room or virtual room to actually fill in the assessment together, because I think the conversations they will have when they're trying to answer each question will be superbly valuable. Like the result will be useful, but just when they sit there and like discover that they don't understand something in the same way, or they think about something different, I think that would be a really great exercise to recommend for people. Like cross-functional assessment completing needs a better
when
name.
I was going through it with Corbin a little bit, we tried it on a few companies, and there were a couple of questions in there that had, you know, it was a yes from one stakeholder and a no from another stakeholder, or vice versa. And I thought that was really cool. It was really interesting.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so to your point, Steve, like the way that I have like been experimenting with this with, you know, the teams that I work with is in that same way. Like it's not, and I think it's something like that I've had that's been a little bit hard to distinguish, to be honest, because I think platform engineering teams that are like a little bit more mature usually have a practice around end user surveys. And this is very much not an end user survey, right? So it is like the times that I've executed this, I've got all those stakeholders in the room as you described. It's not like a bunch of individual like interviews and then I collect all the results and like try to figure out, you know, what's the commonality. It's not that. It's like get everybody there,
Yeah.
simple yes no questions, go, right? And sometimes there's like some discussion on like a question, and like for those I just say, are you more yes or are you more no? Right. And then I just like capture some notes or highlight that question as like, this one warranted some discussion. Like we should come back to this at a different time. Right. But the idea is like within a time box, like period of time, right now it's like about an hour. I can go through this whole exercise with this group of folks. And then get like a rough assessment. Right. And it's just gonna kind of, it's really just going to help have that next conversation of like, okay, like these are the things that we should probably talk about.
On my side, regarding the target audience, I see two sides of the coin. The side of the builder, the platform team, as well. I think we can say it's a builder team, the builder side, and also the side for the top management, because platform engineering is being a buzzword currently, thanks to Gartner. So I think there are two sides. The side where the builder wants a guideline on how to evolve, and the top management wants some kind of diagnostics tools, assessment tools to understand where they currently are. So I think we need to guide both sides of the coin.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And that's why I definitely don't think we should be removing any of our audiences that we're talking about here. I think acknowledging them and acknowledging like, I think the combination of of wide audiences with target audiences and target outcomes will help to like hopefully clarify those waters that can be quite muddy. So I just want to call attention to two things because I've done them in chats and sometimes people do or don't look at chat. So one, I forgot to pull up the deep dive notes doc. I've pushed that into the chat. Anyone can add notes. If you think something came up that isn't right suited for this conversation, but you'd like to like take note of it because we want to come and do it some other time, talk about it some other time, please add it in there. That'd be a great place to track those kinds of things. Secondly, I've tried to capture, and I think Steve has as well, and other people have as well, tried to capture some of the things we're talking about here in comments, sorry, not comments, suggestions in the doc. I'd love to be really concrete about this as much as possible, because I think that when we put things in writing is when we truly challenge whether or not we have alignment. So if you notice suggestions in there that do or do not match your understanding, please share them here verbally, but also feel free to just like comment on the doc on those suggestions, why they do or do not. Feel free to add your own suggestions. I'd love to leave this call with like sort of a document that we can all be really proud of and say, yes, this is like captures the intention of this group and the intention of this piece of work. So that's all I got.
Would it be useful to throw the doc up on screen and go through the changes and comments to just work out if there's any controversial ones we need to talk about, and if there's any that we're just like, yeah, that's fine?
That works. Do you want to do that, or do you want me to do that? I think one of us who have edit rights should do it, but I'm not worried about which.
Here we go. Hopefully that's working. Is that readable?
Yeah, it's working. We can see it.
Cool. I might be looking in strange directions because my monitors are now all over the place. So there might be some more comments. We'll get to them if there's, because I can see a highlight here. Here we go. So this one here, the comments are around, there's always a little bit of concern around assessments that they're going to be used as like a stick to beat people with. So there's just a little note here that obviously, I don't know how we surface it, but we want to make sure we're encouraging people to be good humans around this. Does anyone mind if we resolve this comment? Do we feel there's anything unresolved in this one? It doesn't need to be like a disclaimer on every page, but it's just a general rule of thumb.
It's also a really interesting comment, not actually the comment, but the statement, because I've actually done the platform assessment, the maturity model against our platform engineering team. And I published it within our kind of internal documentation systems, but I've limited it to be viewable only by the platform team, mainly because I didn't feel that, you know, whether the things that came up or that were highlighted were yet ready to be surfaced at perhaps an external level or an external to the team level. So that was quite an interesting one. So it's interesting that it's been called out.
Yeah, and I think Corbin's right. It varies by organization. I've worked places where like we would have like, this is just between the three of us, right? And then I've worked in other places where it'd have been like, hey, no worries, we share everything around here and it's not a problem. So it does, I think it is very contextual, but I think people will feel that they know where they want to share it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think how we word this we'll figure out and we'll evolve over time, but I'm very comfortable with that we have something like this. I would say the number one thing that I get in feedback about the maturity model is people's happiness that it is not a stick to beat people with. Like the fact that it is very much like like there's some verbiage in the beginning to advocate for that, and then the verbiage throughout it is very I don't want to say passive because that would take something away from the maturity model, but it's definitely not like you have failed if you have done this thing, which helps to stop that immediately happening, though cultures will be cultures. And that's, I think, Corbin's point is like, we can't stop people from using this as a stick. All we can do is do our best to make sure the language is not such that it lends itself to that naturally, right?
Absolutely. I think it's a really important point.
Cool. So our next edit is putting the focus on the platform engineering group as the primary audience for the work, which is what we were talking about just now. I think we're all agreed on that.
Did that one thing I just want to call out is, Colin, you asked about the consulting role and saying that is a common role, and I don't disagree with that, even if it's an internal consultant. Like, Lena, you mentioned doing that with your team. Like, I think, you could argue that's sort of a role, a hat you were putting on. Like,
Mhm.
do you, Colin, or does anyone else feel like by elevating the platform builders as the primary target, that we are somehow hamstringing, making it more difficult for organizations to get benefit from using this in some way, or that we're dismissing a core audience in some way?
I think it's okay. Like in the case of a consultant too, it may be somebody that's provisional, that's just going and doing discovery, and they are kind of the lead at that platform lead at that point too. I put a couple of suggestions in the notes doc, maybe of like a way to frame it, because I could definitely see writing a section on here where I say, role play, like as a consultant, here's how I use this within the organization to help facilitate conversations and gather information between different stakeholders to plan the development, and as an internal platform team member, I use this to self-assess my platform maturity and find areas of opportunity while facilitating, it's like maybe there's a couple of different ways we could say how to use this based on experience.
And those are the things I could imagine become blog posts about this, right? Like, obviously we have some consultants on this call. We'll have even more in our group who can potentially share their very positive ways of using it. So absolutely. I just wanted to double check on that. So perfect. Cool.
Cool. And then the next edit is just kind of saying that the sponsors aren't creating the platform directly, but they're supporting it, they're funding it, they're keeping an eye on return on investment or whatever things they want to track. So that just kind of clarifies the idea behind these roles. So if anyone's got anything to say on that, we can take that feedback in.
I'm interested that the head of platform is in the sponsor category.
That's interesting. Does anyone feel that the head of platform should be in the primary group?
That would be my feeling, but it's more of a gut than anything I could argue.
That was fun, probably. I guess it's going to depend on the org too, because sometimes it's like CIO or CTO versus engineer, and their language and what they're focused on can be very different. And honestly, I don't, the one head of platform engineering might be in kind of a limbo there. We've met people that are more of a CIO mindset as like the head of platform engineering, and then more that are like they're the leader of the implementation initiative. It's kind of a fun one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have an opinion either way. I guess it could kind of be both. It's interesting.
You're gonna have to submit. I'm trying to get everything possible.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I'm wrestling with that one as well, because I do kind of see them as a sponsor in some regard, like they're kind of responsible, right? But may not be involved in the day-to-day like development activity, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I guess I feel like at the end of the assessment, who's gonna benefit, like who's gonna read it, right? And it's like the person who's gonna read it is gonna be more likely it's gonna be the leadership team over these different areas, right? And so that's kind of how I think about the sponsor. It's like part of the feedback is that, hey, we might need to like change the organizational structure, or we might need to like make some other investment, or like, I don't know. I'm just trying to think about the categories that we have, like adoption, right? Like we might need to engage with some of the other line of business stakeholders, or those, head of product for retail banking or whatever, right? Like we need to get those teams like aligned. So I don't know. I'm kind of thinking them as like almost like a consumer in some way. We have them called out as sponsors, but
I
maybe
think
that.
you mentioned like they're not in the day-to-day, which prompted me to add another suggestion. Sorry, I keep adding suggestions here, Steve, but I'm trying to like capture these words because I think they're really good at like clarifying things. And so I guess the way I think about head of is I think of if you're in the middle of an incident and someone stands over your shoulder or joins your chat channel or something, would it elevate the fear in the room? Would it elevate the like, would you feel more worried about the work that you're doing? And I would, or would you feel like that person is there to like could make a fundamental impact on the work that you're doing? And I would say that's where day to day comes in my mind. And I look at head of, and I agree completely with Colin. I've had head ofs that I would love to have sitting right next to me during an incident. I've had head ofs where I'm like, how do I make sure that they don't put pressure on the engineers while we're in this incident, right? So this is all meant to be category examples. So Lean, I think you raised the question of like, is head of in the right spot? Do you think we could just get rid of that as an example because we feel like it's too much on bridging between the two? But do you feel like the clarification of day-to-day implementation up at the top level and sort of adding that designing, so that sort of high level awareness at this level helps to clarify? Is that capture?
Yeah, I think it does. Yeah, the day-to-day implementation, I think, just does make it clear. And I quite like your idea of just removing a head of platform.
And if we get enough people asking us about it, like where
Yeah.
would head of platform be, we can then use that to try and help us place
Yeah.
them in the right category, right?
Yeah.
Based on other people's experiences, right?
Absolutely. Because I think the other categories or the other examples in those categories would cover a type of head of platform. So, potentially, director or VP or a manager. But equally, I guess my perception is that they'd just be part of the engineering crew.
Yep.
So, so.
Yeah, I quite like that. By deleting it, you're saying, does your head of platform engineering look more like an engineer or more like a director / VP? And it just kind of helps to distill those two types that we think exist.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone object to that deletion? I can hit the tick button.
No, that's great. That's awesome.
Okay.
And the question, one of my clarifying questions that would help me too on the sponsor side is is audience the participants or users of the assessment, or does it also mean like the people that might have results presented to them from the outcomes of this assessment, or both?
Unless somebody else wants to try typing. Actually, I'm going to undo. Someone else can try and capture, because I think that is a great question, Colin. And I think that there's the reason, this is exactly why I think there's value in capturing this document so we can come back to it. So I think we should answer that, but I think we should answer that through adding a sentence that clarifies it in how people feel. And I honestly could see it going both ways. My personal opinion is that audience, the way that we used audience in previous documents is how I should put it, is both. It's both the people who actually like execute the document and the people who or like execute the like thinking, and also the people who might just be like informed about the thinking around the document. But I think that what we're saying here is that we are building this document for those to use it. Now, how they choose to report about it is up to them, but here are some of the people that may benefit from that reporting. That's how I would see it. But if someone else has something either completely different or similar that they want to try and capture in a sentence, I don't want to try and like rewrite this whole document.
Yeah, I mean, my feeling is like it everything's always going to depend, right? Like, I mean, pretty much everything that we've talked about depends. So, but I think like for the most part, I would say it's both, right? For the most part, you want to be able to, as the platform engineering team, like, make an assessment. And then the reason you're making the assessment is to like go through the results and do something else with it, right? Like, so like it just feels like you kind of you're going in that like eyes wide open saying, hey, like we're gonna like do something here, make this assessment. Now it may be that there's nothing to do, right? It may be at the end you say, okay, well, this is interesting. And I think this is like one of the challenges that I've had so far is like the sort of mapping to category thing. The mapping to category, like if the output I think I showed you guys like in this sort of distribution graph, like of kind of how you kind of see at the end. But if I just said, hey, you're in level 2, level 3, level 1, level 4, right? Like it's like, okay, like so what, right? So like the intention would be then to figure out, okay, I need to go do something about that, or I should consider, and what are the things that I should consider, right? And so it should help you kind of understand what those considerations are and then say, yeah, like maybe it's not the right time for that thing, right? In fact, that's what happened in one of the cases that I have done this with, where there were kind of 3 areas of improvement, and one of them, they're just like, hey, we're not ready for that right now. And I'm like, okay, I agree with you. Let's come back to that in 6 months or a year or whatever. And right now there's like these other 2 things that were a little bit more pressing, right? And so we're like, okay, we're gonna start some work kind of around these other 2 areas, and then we'll kind of revisit the other one later. Um, so that's just like I think it's like both. I don't know if we need to define it anymore.
Cool. On the next paragraph for the stakeholders, we just got some edits here. This is part of that cleanup of those 3 groups. So is everyone okay with this suggested change? I won't read it all out. I can if you want. This is like English class at school now, where we're all making you read a paragraph. Now let's discuss.
My definition of platform includes developer experience, but that's really
I wish that were the case everywhere. I think there's people who have developer experience without platform engineering too. So it's an interesting world out there right now.
Cool. Thank you, Dokie. Corbin, is there anything we need to do to accommodate this comment? So I think we probably aren't going to include this exact text in the background section as part of the assessment. I don't think that's the idea here. I think we've already got this text in the maturity model and in the documents for it, so it's there. I just thought it was useful in this document to just highlight those pieces before we then go into the intended outcome. So this isn't like, it's not required that this text is in the assessment. It's just background information for us.
Yeah, so what I mean, based on this conversation, and I think my thinking around this comment is that maybe not now, but like maybe at some other phase, like when we figure out what other artifacts are needed, like to launch this, that there is kind of this how to use section that Colin was describing with like this sort of like user stories. I really like that framing. I was thinking about and I talked to Abby about this very early on in this process, was like, it's really important that people who are using this already have knowledge of the maturity model and have read like the platform white paper. Like if you don't have this context, like you're going to have a hard time, right? Like, so I think it's really important that before you kind of go down this path, that you like understand the sort of general framing and like all the stuff that's already out there, right? Because I think it's really important guidance before you go down this. So I really like the idea of having like a guide on how to use it at some point, and maybe it's not in here, or maybe it's in a different artifact or something. Like I don't know, but I think like we should capture that if we have it in the notes and something we come back to.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And then like maybe we could build into the assessment a couple of questions that help determine if people have read the maturity model. And then the suggestion could be like, we recommend you go and read the maturity model. That's your next step, your next improvement. Cool. Have we captured that in the meeting notes, the how-to guide idea? Because I really love it, and I love the idea of people sharing their experiences.
Yeah, so I think you can resolve that one, Steve. And
Cool. This is something that I was adding as part of this conversation a couple of minutes ago, where I've said, like, alongside helping people find themselves in the model, it's providing that opportunity for people to collaborate and spark interesting conversations. I think that's a really nice thing to capture as one of the goals of it. So I don't know if anyone objects to that being on there. I thought that was a cool story. And then just seeing if there's anything that needs to be actioned in here. This one, I've taken the changes in already from this feedback. So are we okay with this one?
From my perspective, I am.
Abby did the edit to fix that one. We're gradually getting there. Again, I think Abby, you might have done an edit to incorporate some text for this one. So it's been changed to say, in relation to that organization's current priorities, goals, and resources. So that's a good way of framing it. Cool. I think that's all of the stuff that needed action. These ones are just people highlighting areas that they like and stuff. So I'll resolve those. Just make sure I haven't missed.
I'll shout out. I did an update to audience that you all can. It's so much easier to edit someone else's writing, isn't it? So I've written what I think we were talking about with audience. To still capture that idea, we want to focus on the practitioners, and we acknowledge there are sponsors, but like practitioners is who's going to be the target audience. Feel free to give a shout out there if you'd like.
Yeah, and shout out to Joshua here, who he said, this is just a metaphor. This isn't what we expect the assessment to look like, but it's just that mental model of identifying where you are and where you need to go. So yeah, that's not a suggestion of what the assessment will look like. It's only a mental model. So yeah, I think that's
that's the call out that
Yeah.
people can look at, and we can decide to keep or not keep.
I'm okay with that.
A couple other people
yeah,
nodding.
I like it.
And again, once it gets accepted, it makes it just easier for other people to make suggestions against it. So like accepting it does not mean it's final and in stone, but we can accept it, and then people can make updates. Okay, so we have a few minutes left in our hour, and so I guess a quick vote of confidence. Thank you to Steve for walking us through that. We're sort of in a space now where I think we have a document that captures this group's of set of understanding, which this group also has in mind the group from the last call, which was another 10 plus people understanding, and we will get their feedback as we go. But this feels like we're in a good spot where we're aligned. We know what we're trying to achieve. We know where some of the sharp edges are that we have to pay attention to. Is there any risk that people see in moving forward and trying to actually like create the assessment, like create what is the next step for this assessment now that we have this sort of it's almost like a test suite for it? Like, does it meet our goals? Does it meet our audience's goals and things like that? Is that any risks there that people see?
Oh, don't say risk.
Corbin, it's PTSD from the last call. I appreciate you having a good spirit about it. Okay, so then my hope. So Corbin mentioned we had a quick chat yesterday, and I think it came up on the last call that he and Colin had talked about. They both have sort of pulls from their workday to use something like this, and have now both exercise the thing that Corbin has started creating and using, which feels actually quite similar to me to what happened with the maturity model itself, which was that I had pulls from my day job to look at something like that, and I created something and I got a bunch of feedback from a bunch of people that it was like not embarrassing. That was the level of faith I had in that maturity model when I brought it to the working group. And then the working group got a whole bunch of energy around working on it. So I got that second vote of confidence. This is not only not embarrassing, it's something that we think would bring value to the community. And so I took that draft and said, take it and go with it. And Corbin and I were having a conversation about the assessment that he's done being in a similar position where there is value to be had from the assessment. There's clearly passion within our group to produce something of that shape and outcome. But we need to take the time to evolve it, and the best way to do that sometimes is to have all the information in our hands. And so, Corbin, you can describe further, but I think there's a goal here of saying, let's get what Corbin has already sort of started to create into the public domain so that we can get feedback on it and figure out where we go next as a group, so that we can try and create, evolve, whatever the right thing for this group to produce as sort of a white paper elevated level of document, which this would be more like a draft that we're proposing is the first steps. Did I capture our conversation there, Corbin? Or is there anything you want to add? What else would you like to add to it?
No, I think that captures it. I mean, I think like at least what I have so far, and Colin and I had a chat as well, I think last week, about trying it out with a few like organizations that he's working on very similar kind of work with. And so I think there's like some, there's a lot of opportunities, right? And the reason I brought this here was because I knew like it's not going to be easy, right? But like the end product of bringing it through this, maturity, or this team, is to get the proper level of maturity and proper level of eyes and like experience that this collective group has. And I just couldn't see like having something like this just built like, off in the corner, right? Like, so I'm super excited about, all the, help that you guys have put in, the effort so far, and super excited about taking this journey. And, Abby talked about, kind of where we're going, right? And we kind of have the schedule kind of built out over the next, like, 6 months or whatever to kind of like get us through there. And I'm happy with the progress we've made. It's just, how can we kind of speed up? So I'm gonna see, what it looks like to just like kind of donate what I have so far. And then I don't know if I'm gonna have to go through any like challenges with doing that, but otherwise, like, we'll make sure that it lands in the hands of the team, and then we can kind of make sure that it grows and we get more community involvement and more folks to participate. So super excited, and thank you everybody for helping contribute to this. And I love this. It's super fun.
So I don't know if anyone has any ideas, questions, either about that process or about where we go next. So my current plan is to figure out how to get this recording on YouTube. Hi, future YouTubers. I do have the instructions. I'll be able to figure it out. It'll get there soon. So we can share this document as sort of a last pass through for the people who couldn't make the call. Consider this sort of approved, never in stone, but approved. And then we need to figure out what comes next. And that's going to be still an open question of where we want to go. And I guess we do some brainstorming, maybe asynchronously and or in the next group meeting, to figure out what the next deep dive should be, and when that might make sense. So that's my thinking. What other ideas do people have, or questions or concerns or anything?
I think we could probably avoid some of the distraction maybe if we just rename risk to be like focus score or something. That might help. Like, I don't think fundamentally I don't think the calculation of it is controversial, but it's like it's highlighting areas to focus on. So we might be able to like just remove debate over the word risk by calling it something else.
Opportunity.
Oh, the
Yeah, I've
optimism.
Yeah, like I've done a lot of thinking about this, trying to figure out like how to approach it. And my first sort of thought was just remove the word risk altogether and just call it an assessment, right? Like, but the question remains like how to do the scoring part, Steve. So I think like that might be like the next, it could be one of the next discussions that we have, is try to sort of frame up that sort of concept and how it lands us into a category.
Yeah, we could come up with some ways of like putting words around it, and maybe even try a couple of scoring models or something around it that just help. But ultimately, if it shows you a zone where you're weak and could improve, then that's kind of what we want, right? That's our goal.
Yep. Awesome.
Okay, cool. So then that's our way forward. And yeah, appreciate everyone's time and energy today. Asynchronous chat is always welcome in the Slack or on the docs. And when is our next group meeting? Next week? Yeah, next week. So I won't be there. I will be off sunning somewhere. But the conversation will continue going. It'd be great to have the conversation of where to go next, if people are present and interested in that, and just keep the ball moving. So thank you all.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.